one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sorry, I didn't have my microphone on earlier, but now I do. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Next we have the roll call. Carol.
Councilmember Youngblood.
Here.
Councilmember Cartwright.
Here.
Councilmember Clark-Kretz.
Here.
Councilmember Cortez.
Here.
Mayor Ring.
Here. All right. Next we have up on the adoption of the agenda. Does anybody have any issues with the agenda as it is stated? Nope. Okay, then can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
to approve the agenda.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Abstentions? Now is the time for public comment for items not on the agenda. There is not much public here, but we do have public online. So for those of you online, this is the time. This time is reserved for those of you who wish to address the town council on subjects that are not on the agenda. We can't vote or discuss any of these items, but we can refer your concerns to the staff to be placed on a future agenda. Does anybody in the public have comments for items not on the agenda? Actually, that includes everybody here as well. Yeah. No? You see nobody online too? Okay, then I will close public comment. And we will move on to the consent calendar. All the items listed under the consent agenda are considered to be routine in nature and will be enacted in one motion unless an audience member or council member requests otherwise. Does anybody have any comments on items on the consent agenda? No. Does anybody in the public want to pull any items from the consent agenda? Nope. All right. So now I would entertain a motion for the consent calendar.
Move to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Abstentions? No. Okay. Now moving on to business. We have one item on our business, and it is the organizational assessment presentation by Moss Adams. Wes, would you like to introduce them?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm going to try to keep my comments brief so I don't get into a coughing fit here. With us tonight, we have Annie and Annie, and oh my gosh, it's blank. Claire here tonight. We hired them to do our org assessment on here. They've done an amazing job. So the org assessment, the culmination tonight, it actually meets the strategic planning by council for the initiative 3, the high performing, the physically responsible government goals. Cultivating an effective and efficient organization. Objective 2, identifies and review the town's organizational structure, compensation, and staffing plan. So when we procured them to come on board, they actually interviewed all the staff, compared us to some light jurisdictions to kind of come up with their analysis, what they'll share tonight. But with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to them and they can just go ahead and dig right into it.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having us here today. I'm Annie Rose Favreau from the Moss Adams team, and we have a brief presentation for you this evening. Fantastic, and if you can go to the next slide there. So tonight we're going to share a short overview of our project as well as the methodology by which we got to our analysis. Then we're going to work through the structural and staffing level analysis as well as additional management considerations. So providing an overview of some of the key points that we've outlined in the report that we have provided to you all as well. And then we can talk through next steps, and obviously if you have any questions as we go, please let us know. If you go to the next slide. We performed, as was mentioned, an organizational and staffing assessment, and we really wanted to understand what is working well within the town right now in terms of staffing levels, in terms of the organizational structure, in terms of processes, and where are there opportunities for improvement, especially as the town grows, as community needs change. We want to make sure that the organizational staffing and structures really set you all up for success today and as you move into the future as well. So as part of that, we looked at all 6 town departments. As was mentioned, we interviewed all staff here to get an understanding of their individual perspectives. So this was a fully comprehensive review. if you go to the next slide, I talk a little bit more about our methodology. So we started with those interviews. We also did significant document and data review. Thank you so much to those of you who helped us gather a lot of this information that we looked at. We wanted to get a better understanding of the operating environment and some of the opportunities and constraints that you have here as well. And then we did research into obviously industry best practices, standards, things that you would expect to see like staffing ratios for particular departments and functions. And finally, we spent a good amount of time on peer benchmarking. We wanted to understand when we look at departments in other jurisdictions that serve similarly sized communities, how are these measuring up? Are we in alignment with those? And we looked at both staffing levels and structure. Are we in alignment with those? Is there anything that we can learn from peers? Is there anything that we might want to do differently based on what we're seeing out and about in these 7 peer jurisdictions? So for that, we conducted peer benchmarking, meaning we looked at the information around staffing levels. We also did interviews there to better understand, again, their perspective on these topics. So all of that put together, if you go to our next slide, we brought that into the report itself, and Annie's going to share more on the report topics. But before we do that, I did want to mention commendations, because there is so much that is going really well here, and I think that's one of the themes that we heard. Sometimes our team is brought in when something has gone wrong or gone sideways, and we want to fix it, and that was not the case here. We know that a lot is working really, really well, and this was, how do we continue to improve? How do we continue to get even better and build on the strength that we already have here? So that was really exciting for our team to be able to hear that when we came in and really see that throughout the interview process and throughout our information gathering. We do want to mention you have some very, very dedicated staff members here who have a lot of expertise that they're bringing to the table. Again, really great foundation to start with. We know that there have been some really significant leadership changes in the past couple years, and it's exciting to see that there is also this sense of we're building stability here. And again, that's going to be something that you can grow off of as you go. And finally, there's a real commitment to employee development. I think even the approach of this assessment as well was to say, how can we better support you? How can we make sure that the employees are set up for success so that they can serve your community in the best way possible? So we wanted to highlight those things, especially even before we move into some of the opportunities for improvement that we saw here as well. So with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Annie Fadley.
Thanks, Annie Rose. Great to meet you all, and thank you so much for having us here. We have not been to Loomis before, and it is so cute. We're so happy to be here. We love the main strip, just like delighted. So I'm going to take us through the rest of this presentation, starting here with just a reminder of what your current organizational chart looks like, just so we're all on the same page. You have 6 departments. So you have library, which is a town department. You also have finance, public works. You have your town engineer, who's their own department, planning, and then you have the town clerk and administrative services officer, who's over the permit technician and then over some contracted building inspection and code enforcement work. So that we're on the same page is how things currently look, so you have some context for the rest of the report here. And if you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So our high-level takeaway is that the town, in terms of structure, and we'll get to staffing in the next portion here, but looking strictly at structure, the town is generally well aligned with peers and with industry best practices. When you think about the services that the town provides, you generally look pretty good compared to these things. There are 4 areas where there are some opportunities to tweak how things look so that you are better aligned with those things, and those are listed here. So administrative assistance, backup for the town manager, engineering, and planning, and I'll take you through each of those things. They have their own slide. So starting with administrative assistance. So you have your front desk currently staffed by the permit technician. It used to be staffed by an administrative assistant, and that has kind of transitioned to being the permit tech. That is currently contributing to a pretty high workload for that position. There's a lot of things that the permit tech does outside of kind of triaging people who walk in and doing what you would consider just kind of reception activities as well. And that spills into some other departments also needing to pick up some of that work. So answering the phone, kind of responding to low-hanging fruit in emails, doing kind of the sort of frontline customer service triaging that you would consider might be done by that position. And like I said, the town had an administrative assistant in the past kind of doing those things, and we heard from staff that worked really well when that was in place. And that's a really common position among peers. I think all, if not 90%, had a really similar position doing that function and that work. So that's our recommendation here, is to just kind of consider bringing that position back. That position can handle administration and reception duties, can provide support to planning, engineering, and public works, who are all very public-facing departments. They're answering questions from folks all the time. There's opportunities to have some help with that work from this position, and that will help workloads in those departments as well. And then that will also free up the permit technician to fulfill this full scope of duties for that role. So kind of help balancing workloads all around in terms of reception and customer service. So that's the first piece in structural recommendations. Thank you. And the second piece, this is a relatively small item, but just designating formal backup for key functions of the town manager's role, just making sure that there's clear contingency planning in place for those functions. If that person is out or if something were to happen, it's just important to be able to have a plan in place. So our recommendation here is to designate an existing senior leadership role to cover those functions. It doesn't have to be one person. You could popcorn them out to different people depending on individual strengths and workloads, but just making sure that for the key functions of that role that there's a plan in place for those pieces. That is that. And the next slide, please. Thank you. The next piece here is engineering. So engineering is currently a standalone department, as you saw. This is a relatively uncommon structure among peers, and generally you would expect to see engineering part of public works. That's typically how jurisdictions are structured. The reason for that is that there's a lot of overlap in the work that they do. So even the town engineer's position is technically assigned to some public works functions. There's just overlap in the work, and to gain greater efficiencies, it helps to have them organized together. This is one of the areas where it was a little bit difficult to draw comparisons with peers, and you'll see us talk about this in the report, just because there are some differences between the services that you offer versus the services that peers that we looked at offer, things like water and sewer. So I'll talk about that a little bit more in staffing, but we did as much as possible to equalize that where we could, but you still kind of see the need for engineering to be organized with public works in the long term. When we get into staffing, you'll kind of see some other recommendations that we have around this work, and given all of those, we think that it might be needlessly disruptive at this point to move engineering into public works. And the reason for that is there's other staffing recommendations coming up, and it just, in the short term, will probably make more sense to focus on finding opportunities for those departments to collaborate rather than merging them at this point. And then in the long term, thinking about opportunities to bring those two departments together. One of the key things that this will allow you to do in the long term is, if you do think about adding more staffing to either of those departments, you could hire a position that serves both public works and engineering if they were organized together, and kind of have a person that swings between both functions more easily. So that is engineering. And then planning, really similar here. It's uncommon to have planning be a standalone department. You most often see planning as a function within community development, which is its own department. You have a really high workload in planning currently, and that is both within planning and then also in your contracted sort of planning related functions, so building, permitting. We don't see a reason that it wouldn't work at Loomis to have a community development department, and it's very common at your peers. And then we also heard a lot of staff appetite for that change. Folks think that it would be a positive change, that it would kind of allow for future growth if needed, and be a stabilizing function for workloads. So that's our recommendation in this area, is to create a community development department. It will help establish more efficient processes, better service delivery, ideally, because you have those functions close together, working closely on a daily basis. And then the other piece here is that that department would be overseen by a community development director. And that would include also the permit tech position that's currently under the town clerk. So consolidating all of those related functions into one department. Thank you. And then getting to our staffing recommendations. So a little bit of a different story here. And again, like Annie Rose said, nothing wildly going wrong, right? But overall, we did see that the town staffing levels are slightly lower than peer cities, and all of the peers that we looked at are cities, not towns. But we did some work to normalize these staffing numbers. So this is the equalized FTE column that we have up here. And what we did here is that for peers, we did not include staffing that was directly related to services that you don't offer. And so that includes police, fire, airport, water, sewer, anything you don't offer. And then for peers, or for you, excuse me, we also didn't include your library staffing in this piece of the analysis because your peers do not offer library. That's largely at the county. So after equalizing, we did find that Loomis employs about 1 staff per 520 residents, and at Piers, they employ 1 staff for every 312 residents. So a bit of a mismatch in that ratio. That would be the equivalent of hiring 8 additional employees at the town, which is not what we're recommending. But there are some areas where workloads are really high and where we did hear that there would be a need for some additional roles. So not 8, a few less than that, but these are the areas where we're going to go over them in the coming slides. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention here is that finance and administration appear to have sufficient staffing levels. So seems good there compared to industry standards and peer comparisons. And we can go through the areas where we heard of a little bit of a mismatch in the next slide. Thank you. So starting with engineering, this is an area where there's a really high workload currently. Understaffed compared to peers in terms of the services that you offer, as best we can tell, based on our normalized staffing levels. And then the real difference compared to peers here is the leveling of positions that are in place. So at peers, it's very common to have at least 1 more junior position in place. So that would typically be a senior or associate engineer who's kind of able to provide some backup. You're able to designate some work off of the lead's plate there. And then, so our recommendation here is really to consider adding that mid-level planning position, and then work to also understand what types of things the town engineer is doing and make sure that everything that is falling on the plate of that department is within the scope of that department. It can be really easy for functions to get leaky when workloads are high and kind of go onto planning or go onto public works or go, there's a lot of that happening in all directions. And so just being really careful as you think about workloads moving forward, ensuring that people's workloads is directly within the scope of their work. So that's engineering. Planning is the other piece here, another area of very high workloads, like I've mentioned, and again, tied into high workloads in other departments where you have folks picking up for other people when needed. We found that staffing numbers are generally aligned with peers in planning, but again, similar to engineering, most peers do have a wider range of positions. So in that mid-level associate, senior planner, analyst area, there's just kind of a stronger mid-level there. The move to the community development department will impact the workload in this department. So if you do choose to pursue that, then we would say that the community development director would likely take some of the workload off of the planning director because it would shift up. But if you don't choose to pursue that, then we would say you should consider that mid-level planning position just to make sure there's the opportunity for some of the workload to shift down. So either way that you choose, just making sure that you're adding additional capacity so that the workload in that department is alleviated a little bit just because it's so much of a public-facing department. It really impacts how the community feels about the services that the town offers. And so it's really important to make sure that that department feels supported and like they have sufficient personnel. And then the other piece here is and this was a piece in engineering as well, I think that I forgot to mention, is just as we move forward and as you kind of make these changes, keeping an eye on workload. So tracking workload metrics, tracking things that kind of help you understand, are we growing our personnel as we're growing workload, if that is the case, and just kind of ensuring that you're staying on kilter in terms of workload and personnel. And if you can go to the next slide. So public works, this is another area where we heard that workloads are really high, and a couple things resulting from that. One piece is that you have a lot of staff, or all of the staff, within public works are working in the field to handle the workload, and that ideally shouldn't be the case. You should have leadership level in that department, staying basically in the office and kind of focusing on higher order tasks. And then the other piece here is that the team is currently only able to maintain a reactive approach to work and isn't really able to fit in proactive maintenance tasks that would save the town money in the long run. So that's not quite what you want to see. You want to see a little bit more on that proactive maintenance work side, and that's just a thing that comes along with having enough capacity to do that work. Probably slightly understaffed compared to peers as best we can tell. Again, difficult to compare with the difference in functions that you're providing. But the main piece here is that when you think about who you have in these positions, you have two very new maintenance workers. And so when you compare that one-to-one with peers who might have the same number, but they have more experienced people in those positions, you might not be getting sort of the same impact that you would expect. And so that's totally fine, but you just kind of have to adjust your overall staffing levels and expectations for that consideration. So our recommendations here are really aimed around making sure that people can be working in the roles that they're intended to. We don't have any staffing recommendations at this time because we think it's probably best to iron those things out and then see where you stand. So we mention contracting out work where you can to kind of get a handle on the workload, getting what's possible off of their plate. They're currently handling a lot. Some ideas where you can do that are in the report. Formalizing an on-call schedule that kind of shares the burden there a little bit more fairly. That's a piece that we heard from staff is really impacting their work-life balance and staff morale. And then kind of making sure that the division of work between the like I mentioned, the roles in that department is ironed out. You want to make sure that the folks who are meant to be in the field are in the field, and the folks who are not meant to be in the field are kind of doing higher order strategic planning, long-term planning, that sort of thing. Prioritizing formal training so that you know when you can rely on all of the staff in that department in a full-blown way. And then working to get some of that customer service work off of their plate. So the admin assistant will help there, but also considering strategies like providing the main town line for people who are trying to contact Public Works. They get a lot of phone calls straight to Public Works, and they come in to take those phone calls and answer questions and triage things, and then they're going back out into the field to continue their work. So kind of changing how that process works so that they can focus on their in the field work as much as possible without needing to come back and be distracted in the middle of their day. So that is Public Works. And just one more department here, library. We heard really positive things about the workload improving here after the addition of another assistant librarian in the last year, so that seems like it's working great. That brings you right into line with peers and industry standards, so that's fantastic. We're including this here just to note that if you do ever want the library to pursue additional grants for things like remodels or additional books or programs or anything that you might think a grant could cover at a library, it would be helpful to contract out that work because they're about at maximum capacity currently with just kind of managing the functions of the library. And then the other piece I wanted to call out here is that the library is currently outperforming industry standards for the number of program attendees that come to your programs based on the number of constituents that you have, which is great, but just an area to flag, keeping an eye on that. As kind of in the summer, programs pick up, you want to make sure that people aren't burning out and working too hard. So bringing in volunteers or part-time staff during that time could be helpful. Okay. So our next slide here is an organizational chart that shows all of those changes rolled up. So a green box is a proposed change to a current role, and a blue box is a proposed additional position. So this shows kind of that long-term vision, right, of merging Public Works with engineering, merging these functions of planning and permitting and code enforcement and building inspections under a community development director, which would be a new role, and then adding that administrative assistant under the town clerk. So not too many changes here. 3 blues, 5 greens. Any questions on this before we move on to the next thing?
Does anybody have any questions? No? All right.
Okay, perfect. And then our next slide, this is just the last piece in the report. So there are some management considerations that affect how things kind of feel and how they go, but aren't really staffing or structure considerations. And so we have a management consideration section, and we'll just kind of quickly go through these things. So the first piece here is HR. Your approach to HR is spot on with peers for a small jurisdiction. It's a function of the town clerk. That seems to be working great. There is an opportunity to just consider increasing your use of external HR consultants in situations where you might want some neutral escalation points or when confidentiality is desired. That's a pretty standard practice for when you don't have a dedicated HR person internally, just making sure that you have that option should it ever be needed. The second piece here is technology. So an opportunity to just make sure that the town's use of technology stays relatively current going forward by kind of assigning that role to someone. So just saying, can you be the person who implements technology initiatives or who someone goes to and says, this isn't working for me, can we pursue something different? And kind of managing that long-term technology strategy. And we have some considerations in the report for areas where you might consider upgrading current technology that would help with staff efficiency. Community engagement, so some recommendations also in the report around strategies to manage constituent expectations and kind of just respond to concerns around service delivery when they arise. Just some standard practice ideas in there for you as well. And then in performance management, we just note that it's best practice to offer a standing management training to all supervisors. That's both when they're first promoted into a supervisory role and then also kind of an ongoing like upkeep thing. It just helps folks make sure they have all the tools they need to be successful in their roles. And then the very last piece here is building capacity. And I know this is a conversation you've already been having recently, it sounds like. But as you think about adding additional positions and kind of reorganizing folks, just where will you physically put them? Because I think the town's capacity was at max capacity, but it sounds like that is something that's in the works. So that's great to hear. And then the last slide, please. Thank you. So just a reminder that this is a snapshot in time, right? Intended to guide future conversations and decisions about staffing and structure decisions. It doesn't all need to be done immediately, and I want to call out that in the report we also have a prioritized implementation plan. So there's some things that are higher order issues and some things that definitely you can wait on if it all feels too much. But this is the current state of the town as we saw it, and just information to guide future decisions. So we would love to answer any questions that you have about all of this information that I just threw at you. Yep, done with that. Although there is a slide that says questions if anyone needs a reminder.
Do I have to wait for that slide?
Yeah. Or it says thank you.
Okay.
I guess not true.
Yeah. So I want to start by saying thank you, to all of you, and to your company for putting this together. We needed it. I'm glad we did it. I thank you for reaching out to staff. Thank you for requiring them to reach out to staff, Wes. And I want to say thank you to the staff for participating in this seriously and making this a serious effort. We really needed this. Is something that we were looking forward to. My top comment, I think, just the overall broad comment on all of this is that I read through this and to me, nothing was new to me. It's like I kind of already felt all of this, but you shouldn't. I think we all understand that you shouldn't govern on feelings. And so the fact that we have somebody coming in and telling us these are the things that we see measurably wrong or right with your community, this is with the way your organization is working. Now it's definite. We have a roadmap to go to, and I think that's great. I guess real quick. That additional themes slide that you had, like those were the things that I was like, oh yeah, the focus on those. Everything else, I mean, to me, like I said, it was stuff we already felt like we knew. I feel like we were already moving in a lot of the right directions already. But oddly, like, this is one of the weird things. I don't have questions on this one, so it's very odd. I apologize. Everybody's surprised, but does anybody else have any?
Really?
Go ahead, Jen.
Just want to compliment you on a very comprehensive assessment. It's easy to understand. It's well laid out.
Great.
As far as the priorities go. That's for decision makers like us. It's a big benefit, because this is not the only thing that we have on our plate. So the more clearly and concisely that's laid out it's easier for us, and we thank you for that, because if that took work on your part. Your company is an excellent company. I mentioned a meeting last month or the month before, I forget, that I was a member of the Beta Alpha Psi, which is a honors society for accounting, and Moss Adams, this is the relevancy here, was one of the few accounting partners that offered internships. And so, of course, you know, not many, but those that were available were often, you know, taken by members of Beta Alpha Psi. And so I want to thank you for that, because, you know, that's where the rubber meets the road. You know, you can study only so much, but you got to get into the real world that sometimes, and your company did that, so appreciate that.
That's great.
The other comment I want to make is that, you know, this, not this council, but the previous council had made a decision to hire Wes Heathcock as our manager, and we poached him, is what we did, from the city of Colfax, and we were lucky to get him. Each of us on council have regular meetings with Wes, and just depending on our schedules, I know I have a phone conversation with Wes at least once a week, or sometimes every week and a half, thereabout. But this report here confirms and validates many of our conversations that we've had, Wes. When you explain to me your vision for the town and for the improvements that need to be made based upon your observations and your previous experience and what you observe when, like I say, you come here and you start analyzing how this is different from Colfax and where adjustments could be made for more optimal, efficient operations, this validates you. I wanted to just say that to you because, like I said, we've had several conversations, and you've made many of these suggestions over the course of the several months that you've been here. And it's nice to see it on paper because, like I say, that just shows that you were right on track, and I appreciate that. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Since I went this way already, there's stepping up. Do you have any
I want to hear what
comments?
everybody else
Okay.
has to say.
Jan?
Thank you very, very much. I have also had the great opportunity to work with your company as well, and know it to be an excellent one. So I knew we were in really good hands. Talking with the department heads and with Wes throughout this process, I can see that you've done a really good job talking to all the staff, trying to get as much information that you can, and also allowing the department heads to give you feedback and incorporating that into your report. And no, I really think that it was very, very, very well done. So thank you.
Thank you.
Amanda, do you have any?
I mean, I already told you when I walked in, I was very, very excited to finally hear the presentation from you guys, and I thank you already for all your hard work. This is a long time coming. We are very excited to finally see all of this, and yeah, I mean, this was great, and I have to agree. Like these were all things that we were kind of seeing, and like Danny was talking about, all of the observations that Wes had made. It is really, really good to see it being validated on paper, but also, laid out so that the rest of our community can see it too, because we want the community to feel good about all the changes, because Loomis doesn't necessarily like change, but sometimes change is good.
Yeah.
And sometimes we need to elevate, the way that we processes and different things, and times are changing, and like you said, our staff is overwhelmed. There's a lot going on, and so we just really want to be a support to our staff so that they could all function, and still be happy when they go home, right? So that was basically our goal, is to try to alleviate pressure off of different departments anywhere that we could. So I'm very excited about this. So thank you again, ladies, for all of your hard work, and this was an amazing report and presentation.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Wow. One more opportunity.
I want to hear you.
I
And then
already had my comment.
Well, I'm just
Yeah.
going to say it was very well received. You guys took a lot of time, and it shows. And I think it'll be good for the staff. A lot of the changes you guys are proposing, and the HR stuff, and all that. So, thank
Okay.
you.
I do have another
Oh,
question.
go ahead.
So with that, and the fact that, we definitely need help and assistance in different departments, and there's a lot of work to do in your report for our team, but it seems like that would need to be a little to have some help with doing that as well. So there were some areas in the report that I thought, to in order to do it, will they, would there be able to reach out again to get more help on certain things? Because it seemed like it might have been out of.
Absolutely. So we can do deep dives into any of these areas. This type of report is really a high level, 30,000 foot view on let's take a snapshot of everything and kind
Right.
of raise risks up to the top so we can see the lay of the land.
Right.
But if there's any area that you're interested in knowing more about, having more defined, detailed plans to kind of marching orders on, we can absolutely help with that.
Right,
Yeah.
because this will all fill into our budgeting and that type of thing. So, so then with that, and maybe we should open it for public comment. But so then we would go through, or Wes would go. What would be the modus operandi for next steps?
I will let Annie Rose answer that question. Yeah.
So typically what we would do with that is that we would work directly with Wes to come up and really understand what do we think could be accomplished internally? Is there anything else that could be accomplished through external support? And then is Moss Adams the right team to help with some of those things
Okay.
as well? And so usually what that looks like is us having a conversation after this report moves forward, and then Wes coming to you all and making a proposal for any of
Perfect.
those pieces.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I just piggybacking off that, this is not something that's going to be quick. It's not something that's going to be easy, and I don't think one person can do it as good as Wes is, and so it's going to take some effort from us, from the staff, from Wes, with help, hopefully. Let's open up for a public comment. Does anybody in the public have any comments on the report that we've received?
Jean Wilson, 4301 Barton Road. And thank you for a very informative and helpful report. Even for people who have been around for a while, when you read it through, you get a lot better idea of how things are working together or not. I wanted to say, as a library advocate, I was really happy to see how well things were evaluated for our library. And one of the things I think that is not probably appreciated by anybody that's not been in administration is I think that one of her fine skill sets is that she is a very capable person when it comes to hiring. And so she is able to pull together staff that are complementary in getting the various jobs done, as well as pulling together people that can work together well. And that her staff is small, but is in close quarters a lot of times, working very closely together. And that she has that skill set to bring together a really fine staff. And I think I really appreciate that. The library also has a strategic plan of its own that they are starting to work on, and hopefully we'll be able to expand sometime in the moderate future. And the other area that I was really interested in is planning. As a planning commissioner, I see what Christy has to do, probably more than most of you, unless you're really involved there. And this year I helped a neighbor get a lot line adjustment through, so I was seeing it from the other side of the table on that. And I just got back a few weeks ago from the State Planning Commissioners Conference. And so not only does the planning department, Christy and her assistant, have the things that you would notice, she has six subdivisions of working on that right now, not just Hidden Grove, but other ones. And so that's a major thing. She has lot line adjustments, lot splits, people that just want to know, can I do such and such with my property? What can I do? Is this work? ADUs, a lot of things that show up if you ever read that planning status report and think that's on her back to do a lot of that kind of stuff. But one of the big ones is state law, especially in regard to housing. So at the conference, they showed us a chart of like 110 things that were passed last year by the state for housing. And then the next session, we got a list of the things that are in the works in Sacramento that may or may not get passed. And many of those make things more and more restrictive for what planning can do. And she's got to keep track of these things. Or maybe she and Jeff are keeping track of these things. Because if you mess up some requirement, you can lose a whole lot of what you're allowed to do, and the developer gets more rights. And then add on top of it, more and more of these are coming down with time frame constraints. You must pass it like subdivision in, 5 meetings? But some of them are a certain number of days that she has to get that project done. So whatever direction you decide to go with planning, I think that's an area that I don't know how she does the workload that she does. So I hope you will figure out what's the best way to go with that, and thank you very much for that.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jean. Can I just get a quick, was this double beep, did we change it? Is the double beep the time's up, or is it, how does, it's the warning, but then we didn't have, okay, got it.
I didn't have a number up here.
So you just, yeah, that's what I would have done too. I would have kept talking until somebody told me to stop. So I do that. All right. Anybody else in the public have any comments here? No. Anybody online? We have a couple. Okay.
Go ahead, Sonia.
Hi, Sonia Coupler, Peter Ray Loomis. I just have a question regarding page 2 of the assessment under management considerations. Number 4, the observation is the town's use of software and technology is outdated, and there are some areas where manual processes impede efficiency. So I'm just kind of wondering, like, if the town was to make investing into state-of-the-art, top-of-the-line software and technology, how that would help with the heavy workload that the staff members are having, and how that would also affect what the recommendations are for the staffing levels. That's my question. Thank you.
Yeah. Can we direct? I was going to say, yeah.
Hello, that is a fantastic question, Sonia. So a couple of our recommendations really focus on process efficiency and the opportunities where a system could help make workloads smoother or easier for the members of staff. So for example, being able, for something that is done currently on paper where you might have a paper form, being able to switch to a digital workflow so that anyone could have access on staff to that information regardless of their physical location. Those types of changes are a lot of what we highlight in the report. What we anticipate, we did not see issues that were high enough that we would anticipate, for example, a whole staffing position of efficiency being gained through these systems. We think efficiencies would be gained, but we don't think that that would change any of the current staffing level recommendations. Instead, what that would do is it would actually free up staff time to focus on more critical community work in many ways. And that's what we want for your staff in general, right? Is that they're working on the most important things that are going to have the biggest impact for the community. So a lot of the process changes are really focusing on how can we get people out of some of those mundane day-to-day manual tasks so that they will have more time to focus on those really impactful pieces.
All right. Thank you. Is there anybody else online? Okay.
Miguel, it looks like.
Go ahead, Miguel.
Thank you. First, I want to compliment the consultant on a very well done survey. I was impressed with what you did. I have a couple of questions. On the FTEs, did you consider or take out like water, sewer, police, and fire, those employees when you got the FTEs, since Loomis doesn't have those departments or those services? The other question I had in public or the maintenance, you said that get rid of the town doing the paving. Well, we contract out the major paving. Does that mean they wouldn't fix potholes and those types of things. And also on the tree trimming, we have all the equipment to do tree trimming. I could see on the major trees, like the big oaks and all, those would have to be contracted out. But I saw the town staff downtown trimming the trees. And so would that be, would all tree trimming be contracted out? And then my last, one of my concerns is that I see where if we continue the growth that we're doing now, the planning department would need more staffing. There's just too many things that they have to do now. So again, good report, and those are my questions. Thank you.
Before you answer, I just want to say how much I appreciate having to, as coming to these meetings as a member of the public, trying to cram in all your questions into the 3 minutes that you get. That's very difficult to do.
Yeah.
And so I apologize to everybody out there that you only get 3 minutes, but knowing that, would you guys be interested in answering? Okay, excellent. Can we?
I have a list.
Okay.
Okay, so to your first question, yes, we did normalize those staffing levels. So we took out where possible services that the town does not offer from peers and vice versa, services that you do offer, which is the library when we compared to peers. So those are normalized as much as possible. Obviously, there's limitations where some positions might have 0.75 of their role dedicated to something that you do have and 0.25 dedicated to something that you don't have. That's not the detail to which we're able to normalize, but as much as possible, we did take those out. And then to your second question, so I imagine that came from the list of ideas for things that you might be able to outsource from Public Works. That is really based on just a list of things that you're currently doing that we do see occasionally successfully contracted out in other jurisdictions. It's not to say that those are the things that you should or should not do, but that's a list to get you started. And so any of those decisions should definitely be made with careful consideration. Impact, you should consider whether or not there's impact to staffing levels, which ideally there would not be, and consider what the trade-offs would be. But I think from our perspective, that's a list of things that we've seen successfully contracted out in other places. Anything that you would add? Okay.
All right. So to clarify, is it just kind of these are things you could think about, not necessarily these are things you should do?
Exactly.
Right, okay. Do we have anybody else online? Okay. Then with that, I will close public comment. I actually have a question for Wes. What is it that you're looking for from us on this?
So tonight, staff is looking just for council to receive and provide direction if you have direction on this. The actual policy decision related to this will be part of the budgeting process when we roll forward some of the positions in there. And at that time, council will be making the policy decision based on the budget when you adopt it. That point.
All right. I mean, I said this earlier, and I think we all kind of said the same thing, is that nothing was a surprise. It felt like these are things we knew we should be doing anyway. We've already done some of these things. And so to me, it's do this, like make this
Yes.
happen, right? And so
Yeah, I would, my opinion is as much as that we can afford to put in the budget, would
Exactly,
still be
yep.
able to take care of our CIPs and all the different things that we have going on, right? I am fully on board implementing as much as we possibly can. I would say HR would probably be
Yeah, exactly.
one of the top priorities that we need in HR department. That's a non-negotiable for me.
yeah. And to clarify, I did mean within budget.
Yeah.
Right.
So I also want to give Jan a compliment. Thank you for thinking forward and the option to use their services in the future to help us continue to make these improvements and stuff. You read my mind. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Again, I've worked with that company before in a very similar way, and they really are very robust and thorough, and we are really in good hands. So good. Thank you.
If we go to page 46, Appendix D, the staffing implementation plan, it would be my recommendation to execute those 3 recommendations ASAP, but I understand it's going to be in the next biannual budget. So
Okay.
it's not impacting this year's budget, it's for the next one.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, in developing that budget, there are discretionary funds that can be moved around to help accommodate and provide for this staffing. And so I would recommend if we have to, take a closer look at other funds which are discretionary to do so, because I believe this is a priority.
Appreciate that, Danny. Thank you. I mean, and we've already started modeling budgetary wise. Obviously, we're in the middle of it. And I think we're going to be in a good position to be able to do this and still have somewhat of a reserve kind of going on as well, too.
Yeah, given the pieces and parts of it, it's not just budget, it's time, time to, and this is going to be yet another strategic plan to put together. So the planning process for this will also be, very interesting to go through, because it's not just employees, it's adding employees, it's getting new software systems, it's, with this HR, function, maybe having a company like Moss Adams being able to help out with that as well. So it's definitely putting together yet as another strategic plan, but it's more specific with this in regard. That's what I think we should do.
So I just want to make sure I understand. So it looks like tonight, there's support to kind of move forward with the staffing recommendations potentially at this point. But then further beyond that, start working on some more concise strategic plannings and implementing additional things that we need to get out of this report as well too, and strategies. Some of them are going to be department based, right, and kind of how that works, and not necessarily, as Annie said, that not all things need to rise to the consultant level. We need to make a determination of what can be handled in-house and what needs assistance in there.
Right.
And that will come back forward to council as a contract, probably amendment or something, to get your support and go in that direction.
So I guess what I'm saying is, I know we will need to make a lot of this decision during the budgeting process. So I don't think, personally, I'm not ready to say, go and hire 3 more people today, right? Because we have to go through the budgeting process. So the planning that I'm talking about is rolling that all together. First of all, we know we might need 3 people, but we have to look and see how much money we can afford. So to me, it's just kind of goes hand in hand.
Right. Yeah, and that's why the intent was the policy decision comes at the budget process on the back end of it. And
right.
So we can model and have the budget workshop with council and the public and show how that all works forward in this process. Absolutely.
Okay. Just want to make sure you everything else to add?
I like what he had to
Okay.
say, and I like what Jan said, so I'm interested in moving forward as long as we have both those things in mind.
So just for those of you in the audience who don't happen to have this handy, the appendix he was talking about was adding, they were all the critical things that were required. It was adding an administrative department, the engineering help, and then the community development department kind of fiddling with that and getting it, not necessarily fiddling, but fixing it, I guess is the right way of saying it. I guess we don't have, there's no vote, there's no motion, there's no nothing. Do you have direction?
Staff has
anything else from
direction.
us?
Okay.
Appreciate
All right.
it.
Thank you again to Moss Adams. I totally forgot, but I also had reached out separately to for other questions that I had privately, and you guys were super helpful with all of that too. So thank you for this, and thank you for everything else you've done, and hopefully we get to see you guys again in the future.
I think we will.
All right. With that, we've got nothing else unless anybody on the council has anything they want to add. All right. With that, we're adjourned.